Hello and welcome to the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. Today we are talking about a grape that deserves its due, that hasn't been done right. It's kind of been done dirty. We can think of a few grapes like that, right? Name a couple.
Yep. Blue Nun.
Blue Nun.
Yes.
Grape.
Oh, a grape Gamay.
Gamay.
Oh, yeah.
Would be.
Yeah.
Do we want to throw Merlot in the mix?
Merlot has gotten a bad rep.
Pinot Noir.
You think Pinot Noir has been done dirty?
Some people have this perception it's like thin and weak and
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Definitely. A lot of like misperceptions around grapes in general. Today, I think we are talking about the one that has been done the dirtiest.
Yes.
But that Psalms love. We love this grape. We champion it. I think that we drink it as much as humanly possible. And for some reason, that has not really trickled out into the universe. And in some ways, I think that's a good thing, which we'll talk about later. And in some ways, I feel like this is such a miss if you are a wine lover. Of course, the grape that we are talking about today is Riesling. We love Riesling,
Indeed.
but it's not your grandma's Riesling anymore. Riesling has really come into its own again. This is a grape that dates back to the 1400s. It's got crazy amounts of history, but it's also got the thing that we love the most, which is
Acidity.
acidity,
Acidity.
Oh, boy.
which makes it
Food friendly.
food friendly. Thank you so
Delicious.
much. See, we're all on the same page about this. Yes, we are talking about all things Riesling today. I love that you're gesturing towards the bottle already,
Yeah, it's
Eduardo.
like
He's
begging.
like,
My mouth's watering. It's
I
just-
know.
my brain is just
I feel
activated.
it tickling the back of it. Come on.
leave it to Eduardo to like be magnetic.
I know.
We've talked about Riesling before. This is not the first time, but I think what we really haven't talked about is the grape itself. We talked about German Riesling, we've talked about food pairings, but we really haven't just honed in on Riesling as a grape. And so that's really what we're going to focus on today. All the different things that you need to know about it, how to know if it's sweet, which is
Very important.
one
Oh
of the
my
biggest
goodness.
misconceptions around Riesling, how to know if it's dry, how to know what foods to pair with it, and what some of our favorite specialties are. I think all three of us are going to be on the same page about that one. And then also talking about maybe a region that doesn't always get its due when it comes to Riesling. We've talked about German Riesling, but we haven't talked about the other place where you often find it. So,
Yes. Shall we?
I was going to say, can you do the honors?
Thank you.
Okay.
Like one of those dogs waiting for a treat. Like, go.
Should you balance it on your nose and then? All right.
Oh, look at that reach, that wingspan,
I
Eduardo.
stretched.
All right.
Here we go.
And the bottles for Riesling definitely help with that long reach.
That's true. They always have a nice long neck. This one is done under screw top. We are talking about Riesling from, this is your find.
Yeah, this is my find. This is Henschke, and this is from Eden Valley from South Australia.
Okay.
100% Riesling, super classic style, but maybe kind of unexpected for a lot of wine drinkers. And even if you love the wines of Germany or Alsace or Austria, this is going to be a discovery for you.
I think so. You've had this before, Eduardo?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Always with pleasure.
This is the kind of wine where you smell it and it tricks your brain into thinking that you've drank it because you start salivating already. But I want to talk a little bit about Henschke as a producer, because when you messaged me and you're like, hey, Henschke Riesling's up for grabs.
Yeah, and we snagged all of it.
Yes.
This is the Peggy's Hill. So they do make a few different cuvées, a few different Rieslings. This particular one is not made in great quantity, not imported in great quantity, and all of it went to your club members.
I appreciate that so much. But we have to talk about Henschke as a producer because they're quite famous, not necessarily for Riesling though.
No, definitely known for their Syrah. And this is, they're a producer that's been around since the 1800s. They have this one particular vineyard near a church that it's its own rootstock planted, and it is Hill of Grace, and one of the world's great wines.
Put it up there with Vega Sicilia, with Harlan, with the big wines of the world.
Yeah, first growths of Bordeaux. I mean, it commands that kind of presence at the table. It commands that kind of price.
Yep.
And deservingly so. I've had the pleasure of having it a few times, and oh my gosh.
It's quite nice.
It is. It is just worthy of its stature.
Yeah.
So that's Henschke.
There used to be, when I worked at Press, there used to be a guy that came in. He owns a vineyard here, but is a huge collector of Australian wines. And I had never heard of Hill of Grace before. I knew Penfolds Grange, of course,
Yep.
which is the other big benchmark producer or benchmark wine of Australia, but I never had Hill of Grace. And he was like, well, if you want to learn about Australian wines, you have to know Hill of Grace. And so I remember tasting that for the first time. And like so many of these benchmark bottles, that was such an aha moment for me because this wine is otherworldly. A lot of resemblance to Grange in some ways, but to me, there is a level of like rusticity, but also elegance to it. Where like Grange feels like, like it's almost like, you know, where Harlan feels like very polished and like a Bentley. To me, it was like, this was the Screaming Eagle version. Like there was an element of realness to this wine.
It is, and it's so different because Penfolds is a blend across regions, across vineyards, and this is one place, it really has its home. My impressions of Hill of Grace have always been like brown butter, sage, truffle, like all in there in this kind of like green note and beautiful florals. It is a stunning wine. If you have the chance, do not pass it up. Don't look at it and go, oh, it's under screw cap, I'm going to skip it. This is their Riesling, made, by the same family that's been making the wine since they started in the 1860s. So really stunning wine here as well.
A lot to say about the screw cap too, though. Because it ages. It's a true testament of longevity. When you spend your money on the proper Stillman enclosure, this wine's going to last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. People think that because it's under screw top that it's not worthy of aging. And the Australians have proven that time and time again with wines just like this. And I've had wines from Australia, Rieslings, Tyrrell's, a great producer, under screw top with 20 plus years. And they do age, and they age really gracefully and really beautiful. And of course, we've had a whole episode on cork and all of the merits of cork, but the Aussies love their screw top.
And it's convenient.
It is convenient.
Like this is, you put it in your cooler, and you don't need to think about a wine key. You can travel with it.
Yeah.
Easy
never
open.
gonna be corked.
I mean, you could reclose it and put it back in the fridge, but I don't know anyone that can't finish this bottle.
We're not friends with them.
I don't know.
You said it, and I was like, I mean, same.
Yeah.
I want to just quickly talk about the back of this label, which has some very important information on here. Also, for those of you who are not drinking this wine with us because you're not members of the Podcast Wine Club, I mean, this is your cue. We're talking lots about the wine today.
You actually can't get this wine elsewhere.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. On the back of this label, so there's a lot of different ways that you can tell a wine is dry or sweet. And of course, when we're talking about dry versus sweet, dry is the opposite of sweet in wine speak. It's not sometimes we think of dry as being a textural thing, right? We conflate that sometimes with the word tannin. There's no tannin here. So when we say dry, we mean free of residual sugar, meaning all of the yeast has converted the natural sugars of the grape into alcohol. And so there remains nothing or very little left. And so on the back of this label, you'll see that it actually says dry on here, and there is a sweetness indicator here. And I think a lot of the wines from Australia, specifically Rieslings, have started to incorporate this sweetness scale to make it a lot easier for you to figure out whether something is dry or sweet. So that's one way you could do it. If we were to talk about Germany, which we can touch on in a second, there's another way to do it. But you could also potentially look at the alcohol in this wine. This is 11.5% by volume, which is on the lower side, but not so low that it might make you think that there's residual sugar.
Absolutely.
So I would say, and maybe you can correct me.
No, I think
if
you're
you feel
spot on,
differently.
yeah.
But when you start to see Rieslings that are in that 10% or below, you can kind of assume that there's going to be some level of residual sugar. If you start to see them around 7%, you can assume there's going to be a slightly higher amount of residual sugar. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. I want to be clear about that.
No.
absolutely
just
not.
a different style.
Just a different style.
Think about it as the yeast going into the buffet, right?
Yep.
The buffet is all the sugars, and the yeast comes in and starts eating them, and then you stop the yeast, and there's some food left.
Yeah.
That food is the sugars. So
Yeah.
higher, lower alcohol, higher sweetness, more viscosity. Excellent wines as well, time and place. But in this case, super dry. Hey, a little side note. So the bar here you're referring to,
Yes.
it's also utilized for sake.
Oh.
Sake. A lot of producers use the
Very
sake meter
help
value.
himself.
Sorry, I can't
Why
help
you don't
it.
be sorry? We love
So
sake.
sake meter value, but in the case of sake,
Yep.
not to confuse anyone, higher is drier.
Okay.
So the opposite. Anyway, back to the regular programming.
Back to the Riesling programming.
Yeah, it's been a lot of regions are starting to use the sweetness scale, which makes it really consumer friendly. So it makes takes down that barrier of entry for Riesling. And I would encourage people to try them on all sides of the spectrum. You may be surprised at what your palate really enjoys.
Totally.
Don't go with any preconceived notion. Plus, they're always pretty reasonably priced, so you can try a few different sweetness levels, a few different producers, and really find, I think a great place to do that is like Vietnamese or Thai food.
Oh, we were bearing the lead, but she's running out.
Lots of dishes on the table, lots of varying spices, lots of varying, flavors, and some more herbaceous, some more sweet, some more sour. Open a few Rieslings at different sweetness levels from different regions around the world. You'll very quickly figure out what you like, what you don't like, what goes with what.
Yeah. One of the Rieslings.
One of the Rieslings you like Riesling.
One of the reasons Psalms really like Riesling is because of this, because it is one of these wines that can be made in a dry style or in a sweet style. And so you can kind of play around with dishes, which often do want a little bit of sweetness to counteract things like spice. Sometimes when you have Asian dishes that have a lot of sweetness in them naturally, you actually want sweetness to bolster that or balance that. I also love it with a little sushi.
Oh, absolutely. Sushi and Riesling, best friends.
It's got that ginger component. Like when you have that pickled ginger with sushi, like it naturally has an affinity for like the salinity in the fish. So you add that, you kind of emphasize that with the wine. It really all kind of comes together beautifully. And there's something about the purity of like the fruit in Riesling that is just like, I think back to the 1600s when the Germans are, even in Australia, and like when you were tasting these wines in the dead of winter and it tastes like a mango, a fruit you've never had, or like, pineapple or tropical, like there's just something I think innately pleasurable about that tropical fruit or that fresh fruitness. Like tasting a peach, when it's not peach season is a privilege that we kind of feel like we've lost touch with because food's so readily available, but like that's the magic of these wines.
Well, it totally is. And you bring up a great point, which is what is the flavor profile of Riesling?
I think it hits if you're looking at all the Rieslings and all the styles, you can hit pretty kind of every fruit type. You have citrus, you have tropical, you have stone fruit, you have orchard fruit. It really can run the gambit. So, I mean, it makes it so much fun at the table. And then as they age, it changes. It becomes like a more bruised apple. It becomes more lemon rind and candied lemon. And like, so it changes. It is a moving target.
You just touched one of my favorite subjects, which is aged Riesling.
Yeah.
10 years plus, that's when, to me, I tend to forget about them and whenever I can, and then enjoy them later. And that is where you hit a huge mark.
Yeah, it's so true. These Rieslings, this is a young Riesling. This is 2024, so she's a baby. Mm-hmm. These are wines that are really, really glorious in their youth, and they're going to give you all of that like zigzaggy I'm okay today. Zigzaggy acidity, and it's going to give you that brightness. All the things. If you're a Sauvignon Blanc lover, for example, right? Yeah. This is going to give you all the things that you want from that. But there's also this like textural component that I think people who love wines like Chardonnay can kind of get behind. This is not oaked.
Right.
If it is not in a significant way that you can discern. This is a wine that's giving you lots of fruit. It's very, very generous. But the other thing we have to talk about is the signature aromatic thumbprint of Riesling.
A little petrol, a little clay, a little bit of like Play-Doh component to it.
Yeah, petrol definitely is a marker, and people talk about like rubber and gasoline, diesel. And I think that also has a spectrum, just like the fruit has a spectrum where it can be a little bit of slight reduction, a little bit of like matchsticky thing to very, very like gasoline.
Mm-hmm. Well put.
And that can come with age, and that could also come with style, and has to do, I think, with UV exposure and all these things. But it is like a nice, when it's kind of like right there supporting the fruit, it's a really nice component. It adds a depth to it, and it's something you just kind of don't find in food. You don't find in a lot of other wines. It really is kind of key to this. Grape.
It is unique to Riesling. If you smell, and maybe some of you who are drinking with us, you stick your nose in this glass and you kind of move and you're like, what is that thing that I smell? And you're like, oh, when I was pumping gas.
Exactly.
It's that weird smell that you're like, it should smell gross, but I'm also like weirdly
Some people like
enticed by
say
it.
pool toy or tennis ball or something.
Yeah.
And if you're struggling to find it, I always tell when people are learning about wine, like put that picture in your head, put your nose in the glass, and either it matches up or it doesn't. Don't get frustrated if it doesn't, but like if it wasn't tennis ball, try pool toy. If it try gasoline, like try different kind of things because it's just so linked to your own memory.
Yeah.
And just because my memory of gasoline is different than yours doesn't mean you're not a good smeller.
Think about the
taster.
Zoolander part of the movie
Oh,
where
yeah.
they just spray each other with gasoline, kind of like
Do you
that.
even remember? I mean, you drive an electric car now, so you probably don't even remember
Well,
what
we-
the
we
smell
have
of
both.
gasoline is.
Yeah, every once in a while I put gas in the other car or Lotus.
Yeah.
But I remember those are things you'll never
Yeah.
forget.
Yeah.
Spilling a little gasoline.
Yeah, I'd say the petrol note is definitely there in this wine. It's not the first thing that you smell, but
Just a supporting character.
totally.
Right. Get a lot of florals too, and that's
yeah.
something that comes out with Riesling. It's kind of like this white
Blossoms.
flower, chamomile maybe, that also is so. I mean, I think again, dead of winter. To smell fresh flowers. What a treat.
Yeah, or in the summer, which is what we're heading into.
Indeed.
Where Riesling, I think, really shines because it gets to play with the foods that we're often consuming with it. I was just in Germany, which we will definitely talk about. Laura and I have an episode coming up because, believe it or not,
Dreams come true.
dreams come true. We'll leave it at that. We made dreams come true in 2025. So we'll dive into Germany. But, as when I was there, it was really interesting because, obviously we drank a ton of Riesling in Germany.
I bet.
And it worked with so many dishes. And I think people think of Germany as this place where it's just like, Wiener Schnitzel and brats. And
Sausages,
we
yeah.
certainly had our helpings of that. But there was also a lot of fresh food and cheeses and things that you might associate with like more of a Provençal style table. So like salads and pâtés and things like that. And the Riesling was just so delightful and works super, super well. So I think as we're heading into these lighter months where we're having like picnic style foods,
Yep.
what a perfect treat to have alongside.
Yeah,
Was there a super unexpected pairing on this trip that you said, wow, I would have never thought of it?
Ooh. Well, I'll tell you the most unexpected thing was we were in Spargel season, which is asparagus season.
Okay.
Yeah. You're like, Spargel, yeah.
Oh my God.
Spargel season. So
It's like when a waiter tells you something, you're like, no, I'll figure it out
Yeah,
by
I'll
the time
Google
it gets to
that.
the sauce.
I'll Google that later.
Like, is it in a bowl or a plate?
Is this a slice?
Do I need a spoon?
Yeah, Spargel season. So it's everywhere in Germany in the spring. So we were there in April.
White asparagus or
Both. All the asparagus,
Oh.
all the ways, which as Soms, you both know, incredibly difficult to pair,
pair.
right?
Yes.
But Riesling worked with all of it. And it
Perfect.
really didn't matter what the preparation was. And I'll tell you, because you both worked in hospitality, so you know how expensive white asparagus is.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
They were serving it like bread.
It was raining.
It, like
rained white
raining white
asparagus.
asparagus. I'll throw pictures up on the YouTube video. We couldn't have had more white asparagus. Like to the point where like we went to dinner one night and there was just they're in this really cute little city. And across the way on the street was just a basket of like fresh peeled white asparagus that someone had just like
Yeah.
left sitting.
No
They're
way.
just like,
Yeah.
Help
Okay,
yourself.
you feel free to cut this. Did you
Yeah.
all have a conversation about how everything smelled?
We sure did. We sure did. Because there's only so many bathrooms in the places
You're like,
in these wineries.
it is a thing. I
It's a
have been
thing.
in Europe for white asparagus season,
Yes.
and you're like, wow, that.
Yes.
It's a sight.
It smells interesting. Not like it usually does. So good
Coming
thing,
out your pores. We'll
coming
just
out your pores and then some. So thankfully Riesling's very aromatic and sort of counterbalances that, I suppose.
What was your favorite preparation? Like just plain with olive oil, like beurre blanc with an
No.
egg?
My favorite, this is so decadent. My favorite preparation was white asparagus soup.
Ooh.
Where you have enough to make a soup. Usually you get like a stalk or
This
two.
is what I'm saying.
We were like, we'll just blend them all together. That's,
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
But
amazing.
when you're in a
Crusty
situation.
bread on the side.
Yes. Oh, and the bread is so good. I'm sorry. Apologies to Italy. Tuscany, you can keep your bread. Germans, they
What?
have the bread game on point. It was so good. And their
Wow.
butter.
Pretzels? Did you have a pretzel while you were over there?
We did. But you know what's interesting? You eat a lot of those foods like in the cities versus like out in the countryside. Like they certainly have it, but yeah, it was really interesting. And yeah, to go back to like Riesling and all of its pairability, there was nary a dish that it didn't work with. It like truly went breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
That's amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's a little like sake in that way.
You can start. You can start early with Riesling.
I think if sake had a best friend,
Yeah.
it might be Riesling.
They definitely
I
walk
think they
into
could party together.
When they were reaching back into their cellars in Germany, like what? Do you remember the oldest bottle you had?
Ooh, the oldest bottle that we had was from the 70s or 80s.
Nice.
So good. I mean, they get this nuttiness to them. They become a little butterscotchy. The peachy, lychee side of things starts to get like almost like canned and syrupy.
Even when they're dry.
Even when they're dry. And that's the thing with Riesling that
So
I think
cool.
is so hard to reconcile with is you smell these wines, right? And it gives you this illusion of perceived sweetness. You think that because it smells like peaches and all of these sweet summertime fruits, that it's going to be sweet, but it's not. It just has the flavor profile of all these things. I do want to talk a little bit about sweetness and this idea that and I know we've talked about this before, but I want to come back to it because I think that sweetness has gotten a really weird, bad name. And I get where it came from. I think a lot of the cheaper wines out there do tend to have a little bit of sweetness because it can cover things up. But the thing that we forget is sweetness, especially when it comes to a grape like Riesling, can really amplify some of the flavors that are in this very high acid grape. Outside of just like pairing, like, do you have thoughts on sweetness as just like a drinkable thing?
Absolutely. I mean, there is, again, a time and place.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just want a little sweetness,
Yeah.
whether it's a spicy dish or a dessert or, sashimis, things like that. It's a comfortable place. And it gets bastardized, as you mentioned. But it's fun to a certain degree, certain level. Obviously, you don't want to abuse sweetness because the hangovers are gnarly.
Well, and your palate gets tired.
Absolutely.
You know?
I think no matter what, it has to be balanced.
Yes.
And it doesn't to me, I feel like, yes, sweetness always gets bad idea, like this bad thing that's sweet, it's bad, drier is better. But in reality, like we seek balance. So if there's high acid, if there's high alcohol, sometimes you need sweetness to balance it out. Like nobody wants to have a Cosmo, with no sugar in it.
Correct.
Like there needs to be a balance. Like iced tea, you have bitter, you have acid from the lemon, you need sweetness to balance it out. It doesn't makes it better. It makes it all complete.
Yeah.
It's like when you're cooking dessert and you add some salt. That salt is not making it salty. The salt is enhancing everything else, balancing the dish. I think if there's sweetness in a wine, even if it's a dry wine, if it's a Cabernet, if it's a Chardonnay from Napa, if it's a Vouvray, if it's Riesling, if it balances it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
I actually don't. Yeah, I'm not really even concerned in the grams per liter or how it.
Yeah.
If it feels complete on my palate, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah. I'm with you. And you set me up perfectly because I was thinking about this on my way over to record this. It's so interesting to me that we have no issue with it when it comes to champagne.
Right.
We expect dosage in champagne. We expect that addition of sugar because champagne is so high acid. Riesling isn't that far off from the levels of acidity that you get with champagne. So, it sort of justifies this idea of having some sort of sweetness to bolster it, to balance it.
Yeah.
And I think it's delicious.
If it's a balanced wine, it's a balanced wine.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because I'm curious about wine and its composition and where it sits. But at the end of the day, if it feels balanced on my palate, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah. Lower alcohol.
Oof. Well, there's this whole trend that has happening for forever, right? But no, I never look at the alcohol. To me, it's about trying the wine and going back to the balance. It could be, sometimes you're surprised, it's 16% wine, but it doesn't drink like it. And sometimes it's the other way.
Yeah.
It could be very low, but it's not in balance.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the nice part about Riesling is it's mostly going to be
Lower in
alcohol.
Yeah,
Also,
rarely.
I feel like if I want to have, like you just have, like either you have a cocktail or you have 2 glasses of wine. Like you just kind of like you have to monitor your own alcohol consumption and how you're feeling and kind of your goals and your health goals or whatever it is. But like if it's we're talking about 8% to 12%, like
not that big a difference.
It's not that big of a difference.
Like who's looking at their bottles of vodka going like, ooh, this is like 46 versus 49.
Yeah, I never drink cask strength. Like, it's so negligible overall. It's like whether you have that second bottle that really is going to affect how you feel tomorrow.
Well, and let's talk about how quickly we're drinking it,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think if people want to have lower alcohol options, I would just say drink better and drink one less drink.
Yeah. I want to talk about how to find great Riesling. You guys do all the work for us, which is ideal.
How do you,
But, let's talk about some of the places that if you are walking to a wine shop or you're at a restaurant, right, where are some of the regions that you should be looking to find a great bottle of Riesling?
Alsace.
Okay.
If you want, and typically they're dry. They'll say if they're not. I think
California.
California has some great stuff. Germany, of course, Austria. There's some really hidden gems. If it's a good Gruner producer, it's typically their Riesling. If the Riesling makes it over here, it's a fair assumption it's going to be delicious.
A good tip.
Occasion, Northern Italy has some great Rieslings because of the proximity to the Dolomites and all that area as well.
Australia, obviously, we talked about. 2 places that neither of you have hit on domestically.
Ooh. Oh, of course, New York.
Finger Lakes.
Finger Lakes. Yeah, outstanding. Some of the best in the country.
And Washington.
Yes.
Washington has some fantastic Riesling. They've been doing it kind of longer than a lot of, and New York as well, doing it, have a tradition of growing that grape, probably more than California. So some nice stuff coming from them.
And I will say in New York and the Finger Lakes, and I went there for the first time last year and was really blown away by the quality of Riesling. I think to me that is, Riesling and Cabernet Franc are the 2 grapes that I'm most excited about. Most people are most excited about from the Finger Lakes. But what I loved is like you really do run the gamut of dry to sweet. And it's always indicated on the label.
Yeah.
Because they are making such a wide array of different styles. It is quite cold in the Finger Lakes. They have trouble getting ripeness there. So you do see quite a bit of sugar to balance the super high acid.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
They do tend to be lower alcohol. But if you want something that feels a little less of that zigzaggy acidity, that racing acidity, that's when you can look to warmer climates like California.
Yes, Washington.
Stony Hill makes a great Riesling. Smith-Madrone makes a great Riesling. And they're coming from Napa Valley proper. I mean, they're right, which is crazy.
Crazy. They could be growing cab.
Yes, which
but
they do, but
they found the place and they found an audience for it. Those wines are great.
Yeah. And Smith-Madrone has always said they have a little bit of residual sugar in their Rieslings, and it's lovely. And I don't think it's something that you would immediately notice when you taste those wines, unless you were professionally tasting them and you're like trying to assess it. But as a consumer, you're like, oh, this is kind of like, this is a richer style of Riesling. This is really lovely. It's rounder, it's softer. And so it doesn't have quite that zigzaggy acidity. So that's something that you don't gravitate toward. Look to the warmer climates. Look to the places that are going to give you that generosity of fruit that you might not get otherwise. We talked a little bit about food and wine pairings, especially with the German stuff. I know for all 3 of us, Riesling and Thai food just...
There's something with the Thai basil, the herbs, that kind of freshness to it. There's always kind of like a sweet sour spice that really resonates with the wine. I also do like fried cutlets, like a Milanese, like pork Milanese. You would
totally
squeeze lemon over top.
Yeah.
Great with high acid wine. Fried chicken, those sorts of things, kind of cuts right through it, where you'd like drizzle honey on the fried chicken. You just stick with a Riesling, you're good to go.
Yeah. I think you can treat Riesling in the same or a similar way as you can champagne.
Absolutely. Because of that kind of perky acidity To me, one of my favorite things is going to a Szechuan restaurant or Cantonese and just get a bunch of dishes, get a bunch of people together.
Yep.
And when you have like the Szechuan peppercorn, the Szechuan flour that numbs your mouth, and then have a sip of that generous style of Riesling, life is good.
Totally. Yeah. Remember, sweet balances spicy. as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these, especially like Thai dishes, like if you're someone that orders pad Thai, like, that you get on like DoorDash, that has a lot of sugar in it. You want something that actually can kind of stand up to that and can kind of amplify that. So a slightly off-dry Riesling. I know we mentioned in the episode with Jenna Fields from German Wine Collection, this idea of finer Riesling is a great way to go, which is a weird classification that just means balanced sweetness.
Yes.
So you're going to feel it, but not too much. It's almost like drinking a lemonade. Should we also talk about some of the other levels of sweetness when it comes to German?
Trucking. Keep on
Which
trucking.
means
Super dry.
Super dry.
Yeah.
I would also want to talk about sparkling Riesling. Because
Sect,
there's also
That's
a whole
right.
category of like where you want to see that intersection of Riesling and Champagne at the table. You could just actually grab a sparkling Riesling.
That's true.
And those have sweetness levels like any EU country, Brut, and up and up and up. So that's, you can kind of tell what you're getting in the bottle.
And now there's a VDP classification for sect within Germany, which means the quality of sect is going to continue improving. I think the issue with sect that we've traditionally had is it's a really wide category, a broad category that sort of lacks some of the stricter laws that you see in places like Champagne or even like with Cremant. Sect is starting to get, within the sect category, you have the VDP classification, which means that you're going to start seeing some more integrity, I think, behind the
Great for the
sparkling.
consumer.
Leave
at
it
the
to
end
the
of day.
Germans to add structure to a system. Like they do, it's like too loosey-goosey with all this sparkling wine being thrown around. We want our consumer to know what's up. So
Yeah.
love that.
Oh, the Germans. They think, I love the Germans because they think that they're like making everything more organized. But
Easier.
in reality, like it's so overcomplicated now.
Overload.
You're like, wait, stop, my brain hurts.
But their intention is good, right?
Correct.
And the producers usually follow suit, and the best producers kind of rise to the top. So
Yeah.
it's a good time to be drinking sparkling Riesling.
Yeah, we love sparkling Riesling. So Sekt is out there. You can find it in most wine shops. We mentioned Trocken, so Trocken is the word you're going to look for on the German wine label to indicate that it's dry. But then you also
By
have,
itself, yeah. Trocken by itself. Because
itself.
then you can start adding little
don't
parts.
get confused when it starts to come. The word just keeps compounding.
Kind of like a train. There's like the caboose, and then you can keep adding. So when you get all the way to Trockenbeeren Auslese,
Right.
Yeah.
then you have a...
So between Trocken and Trockenbeeren Auslese, there's Auslese, which is your off-dry, which is your later harvest. So that could be, but those can still be dry. And then you get into your Spatlese, which is your late harvest. Those 90% are going to have some sweetness to it.
I would say most of what you're going to see on the shelves or in a restaurant, if you see Auslese or more specifically Spätlese, most likely it's going to be sweet. But you can also always raise your hand.
Absolutely.
Like you can always ask. My recommendation is always assume that it's dry unless otherwise indicated.
Right.
Unless you're talking about German Riesling.
Yeah.
In which case you should always raise your hand.
Yeah, and just, looking at the alcohol is the best way. I mean, it really, they can't fake the science.
That's true.
Then you get the Trockenbeeren Auslese or TBA.
And that's for dessert.
Yeah,
Yes.
those are definitely right at the top.
Or
right?
Wagyu beef.
Syrupy.
Yes. And you just need a little bit. Really, a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, that sweet, savory, we talked about sweet going with Asian food and sweeter things, but sweet and savory.
Sweet and salty.
Sweet and salty, sweet and umami.
Yep.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, this is where, if you're in Germany and you're doing a tasting, you're eating food, it's like as the wines get less dry and the food gets more savory, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is where we can party.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially really, really rich, like foie or like really rich cheeses that just
Pate. Yeah.
ask for like something like that.
Oh, I just did, you guys remember the beef, it's what's for dinner.
Yes.
Right? So my best day in life was when they approached me about doing a partnership, which I was very excited about. But part of what we did was I did this video on pairing the lighter dishes that we see with beef with wines that are not Cabernet, which is traditionally what we would do. And so one of those things that I did was a summer steak salad.
Ooh.
So you would do these just sliced steak on top of like greens, corn, tomatoes, things that also have a little bit of sweetness, but you want to retain that freshness. That's where Riesling,
I love
specifically
that.
like a finer Riesling.
Yes.
So delightful.
Oh, and there's like a little bit of fish sauce to
Ooh.
give it that little bit of funky edge to it.
I like that.
Yeah, because like umami, right?
Yeah.
Umami and saltiness and like a little bit of
Totally.
funk. with Riesling.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So much fun. This wine is changing because of the temperature and because of the amount of time that it's been in this glass. And so I do want to call that out. We always talk about temperature and what temperature to serve the wine. What do you want to say about that?
I think colder. I think high acid wines, even high acid red wines, a little bit of a chill kind of tempers that on your taste buds and calms down the acidity so you can taste the rest of the wine. So I think this needs a little bit more
Always
of a chill
start
on
around
it.
48. Yeah, right out of the fridge.
Yeah.
But yes, it warms. This one, I don't know if you noticed, it has a little bit of saline kind of component.
Totally.
Beautiful kind of like saltiness to
Yeah.
it. And the petrol kind of took the back seat of the car here.
Yeah, which I like. And I think sometimes you get that with Aussie Riesling, sometimes you don't. Depends where they come from. But I do think Eden Valley Riesling, which is where this is coming from, always gives you these like sort of florals, this fruitiness, but it retains the acidity. I mean, that's the key. You get a lot of that with warmer climates, like in California. But Eden Valley, there's something very specific about this place.
Super. It's like, to me, it's all parts of lime are coming out of here. Yeah. The peel, the juice, like lime leaves, like it's just so bright and citrusy. And
The last thing I want to talk about is quality of bottle for your dollar. Can you do better than Riesling?
No, not for aged wine. Not for aged white wine. I would say the only one that would come close would be like aged Rioja, like dollar for value for an older bottle of wine. But you can find older Rieslings out there
Oh, absolutely.
that are just
Look for this. gems.
unbelievable values, like under $50.
Yeah. And they're kind of hard to kill.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry so much exactly about how it's been stored. Plus, your barrier to entry is like not a lot of money. So even if it is like off or past, which I doubt it will be, like you didn't break the bank on it. So
Think about the economics of Riesling, right?
Or the
A lot of
Germans.
these producers, including Henschke, have been in business for centuries.
Right.
So they already kind of paid for the land.
Right.
They're doing things just with quality driven. And also another thing is that a grape like Chardonnay often needs a little makeup, right? You need to put a little bit of malolactic fermentation barrel, which costs money.
Yes.
So Chardonnays, 90% of the time will be more expensive than Rieslings, which, bam, that adds to your point.
The flip side of that argument, however, and I will challenge you on, is what is so crazy about being in Germany, when you see how they are harvesting,
oh, what a nightmare, huh?
what the hell?
Yeah, that's a steep and
80
dangerous
degree slopes. You
and
wouldn't
grandma's
ski
down there with a
this.
rope and,
Yeah.
They
and a
literally
basket.
harness these people to the side of a cliff, and they're like, "Go harvest these grapes." That is bananas to me. So, like, that's where I don't really understand how you can get quality in the glass when it comes to Riesling from Germany or from anywhere when you have
about
situations
drastic.
like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, their workers' comp insurance, must not be what the same it is in California.
Right. I mean, we think of like, the cost of Burgundy, and a lot of that has to do with the cost of land and the way that is all set up and the demand. But then you look at somewhere like Germany and you're like, this math's not my thing.
Yeah, who would want to invest in something like that? I mean, the great sites are on the river are really kind of taken, and these guys, like, they've owned the land for.
That's true. I was just talking about harvesting, but like they have to be farmed.
Yeah.
And like it's not
There's
even
no
like
way you can do mechanical.
like our friends, Vince, Morrow,
Yeah.
and Angela, they went over and did a harvest as interns.
No,
So
no,
maybe
no,
that's
no.
maybe that's where all the labor is coming from. It's master sommeliers and MS candidates here in the United States that's actually subsidizing
Oh my
all of the
gosh.
great vineyards in Germany.
What do your shoulders look like after that?
Oh.
Your shoulders and your
Your
quad.
calves.
Oh my God.
Just
No.
I mean,
No,
because
You're a mountain
if you
goat.
come back without broken bones, I think you've won.
It's wild. I don't know. I mean, listen, I've seen it.
And their slate soils are not like
Right.
they're not like solid rock. They
Yes.
they're what makes them so great is their frailability. And so no, I'm
Extreme.
Yeah.
I'll go on the drinking tour. I'm not going on the
Yeah,
harvest.
no, we stood off to the side and we took pictures and looked very cute. But no, they liken it to like sliding dinner plates.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you're trying to ski on this 80-degree slope.
With
and
sharp scissors and a heavy bucket. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Hard pass. Thank you.
Spiders
but no thank you.
and snakes aside.
Yeah. But I do think that Riesling is like, it's still one of these grapes that doesn't really get its due outside of our little circles
Right.
out in the commercial world. Once upon a time, Riesling, German Riesling was so highly sought after. It was actually outselling and fetching higher prices than Bordeaux and Champagne in the 17th and 18th centuries. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
we're in weird
Let that
times right
sink
now.
in.
It
Yeah.
could come back. Maybe now's the time to invest.
There's legendary, cases of it in the Titanic, right? Like they were serving German Riesling on the Titanic.
I didn't know that. That's a fun fact.
And yeah, I mean, these are like historic wines that have had a long life. And more people will find their way back to them. I feel like they're not worried.
Well,
Comes and goes.
in the meantime, they have us.
Yep.
This has been so fun and so informative, hopefully, for everyone listening.
Enlightening.
I just wanted to give Riesling its moment.
I love
and
it.
I feel like we've done that. You guys, if you haven't figured it out already, the Henschke Peggy's Hill Riesling from Eden Valley is exclusively available in the Wine Access Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club. All of the information to join that wine club is in the description below. It's $120 a month plus tax, but including shipping, and you get 10% off all your wine access purchases. It pays for itself. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank
you.
A pleasure.
It is always a treat to
these
see
are,
you. Thanks
these
for
are
having
limited
us.
bottles, so thank you for opening one with
I
us.
mean, here we are. Laura, I will see you in a few weeks so we
Yeah.
can recap our very exciting
Yes.
2025. despite
Don't
the
miss
fact-
that one.
Don't
That's
miss that
going to
one.
be
Yeah.
exciting.
Can't wait.
And we did it in the same week, which is
Even weirder.
craziest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and in the first half of the year, we're just like, we're go-getters.
I know. Now we have to do a 2025 bucket list part 2
Part
to figure
two.
out what we're going to do in
Yes.
the second half. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching. This is available not only in the audio format, but also in video format over on YouTube. So if you haven't just joined us there and hit that subscribe button, I encourage you to do so. And until next time,
Cheers.